Hello everyone, and welcome to the Distinguished Writers series. This is our final reading of the season with the wonderful Edwidge Danticat. Introducing her will be one of our fiction faculty members, Claire Massoud. And so, without further ado, here is Claire. Oh yeah, just to announce that there is a book sales table at the back of the room. If you want to buy a book after the reading, Edwidge will be signing at the front if you want to get your book signed by her. And so, without further ado, Claire Massoud.
Thank you, Gabriel. Welcome, everyone, on this beautiful spring evening. It is a particular joy and honor to welcome Edwidge Danticat as the final reader in this spring's Distinguished Writers reading series. I will keep it snappy because you're here for her. Since the publication of her extraordinary debut novel, Breath, Eyes, Memory, in 1994, when she was only 25, or were you still 24? 25. And the collection Crick Crack in 1996, Edwidge Danticat has been, for any serious reader, a household name. It's hard, perhaps 20 years later, to reconstruct the importance and impact of those first books, in the same way that it's hard to see with hindsight the groundbreaking importance of Philip Roth's Goodbye Columbus or Portnoy's Complaint. Very different, though Edwidge is, from Mr. Roth. But Edwidge Danticat's are books that changed indelibly the literary landscape of this country. Edwidge has written many remarkable works in the intervening years, both of fiction and nonfiction, for both adults and young people. Among them, The Farming of Bones, The Dew Breaker, and the extraordinarily moving memoir, Brother, I'm Dying, which, if you haven't already read it, I cannot recommend highly enough. She has worked in film and has been a longtime advocate for her native Haiti and its people. She's been awarded so many prizes that it seems unnecessary to list them here. Suffice it to say that we are continuing our run of MacArthur geniuses with Edwidge Danticat's visit. And perhaps, if you're lucky, she might someday show you the room she must have at home that's papered with honorary degrees. Edwidge's most recent novel, Claire of the Sea Light, was published in 2013. It is as delicate as a spider's web and as inexorable as the great wave that opens the book. Over the course of chapters that seem initially discrete stories, a sort of Winesburg, Ohio, of a small Haitian town called Ville Rose, Edwidge brings us to understand the secrets and the sorrows that tie her characters across class and generations. It is yet another remarkable achievement from this boundlessly talented writer. Welcome, Edwidge.
Good evening. Bonsoir. Thank you, Claire, for that wonderful introduction. Claire is and Krill would say the Tokai, the namesake of the book. And thank you all for coming on this really beautiful evening. I imagine it will get darker and darker as as we go, but I won't keep you until morning or anything. I want to say my family's watching the live stream from Florida, so hi, babe, hi, girls. So this I'll read you 3 moments from Claire of the Sea Light, and then take your questions, whatever they may be, personal, political. So Claire, not Claire Massoud, but Claire of the Sea Light is. People always ask, is it a novel? Is it a short story collection, story cycle? I always say it's a collage. Claire of the Sea Light is the story of a little girl whose mother dies in childbirth, and her father is a poor fisherman who has to make a terrible choice that many parents have to make in different places around the world, whether to keep their children with them and have a very difficult and sometimes almost impossible life, or to leave, as my parents had to do, and leave them with other people. In my case, it was my aunt and uncle. But in Claire's case, her father chooses a woman named Madame Gaël in this town called Villerose to give her to raise. And it takes a long time to convince Madame Gaël, but eventually, in one of the moments I will read, she will make up her mind. So when I was writing this book, I imagined the reader as a kind of participant in the book as well. The whole story happens with some flashback in one night, and I imagine that you, the reader, are in Villerose, which is a town that's based on the town on Léogane, where my mother was born, and where my grandmother's house still is. So Claire is, we meet different people in the town, and Claire, that are connected to Claire and her family. So the first people the first little bit I'll read is about the two Maxes. They call them the two Maxes, but it's a father and son, and the father is a school teacher in the town, and his son Max, he's Max Senior, his son is Max Junior, and the grandson is Pa Maxime, which is a kind of play like, for those of you if you speak Creole, Pam is like mine, but Pa Maxime is like not mine. So the child's paternity is just as questioned as his name. But I'll start by reading this moment with Max Jr. on the beach. So imagine you're on the beach with them, and the light is falling a little bit, just as it is now. Now, as he walked fully clothed to the water, Max Jr. thought of his father's version of a folk tale, one the old man had told him when he was little. In the folk tale, a boy is lured into the woods by music. The deeper the boy walks into the woods, the denser the woods become, and the more beautiful the music. The boy follows this music until he gets so lost that he no longer knows where he is. He becomes so scared that he wants to follow the music to see where it leads. After he walks so far that the woods become impassable, he begins to cry for help, and that's when a spirit emerges and makes a path for him. The path leads to the sea, where suddenly the music stops, and the boy is now so tired that he lies down and falls asleep. When he wakes up, the boy finds himself back home, safely in his own bed, with his head full of music. The spirit in the woods saved this boy, his father said, because the spirit wanted the boy to remain innocent and good, and that innocent and that goodness was as precious as the dreams that the spirit has placed in his head. And because of that innocent and that goodness, the spirit would watch over this boy forever. Max Jr. now slipped into the water, feeling the cold waves rise and fall around him as the water ballooned his shirt. And the sea, he thought of music. He also thought of flowers and birds. He thought of the birdhouses he and his father had built together after hours of schoolwork and judo practice when he was a boy. He thought of the orchids and roses in his father's garden, the dragonflies that buzzed around after a heavy rain, and the fireflies that bombarded them at night. He thought of yellow jasmine, his mother's favorite flowers. She would tie a bouquet to the bell on the front of her bicycle, then the two of them would ride next to each other through town. He remembered the talk they'd had shortly before he left town. "You are who you love," she had told him. "You try to mend what you have torn. But remember that love is like kerosene. The more you have, the more you burned." He liked his mother's blunt aphorisms. He also liked how she tried to explain Villerose's rural graves. The goddess La Sirène, she said, made her presence known by swelling a wave several feet whenever she craved human company. He was remembering all this, he knew, as a way of thinking about his son whom he might never see again. Would meeting him today have meant anything at all to his son? How long would it take the boy to forget him? Would his son grow up calling another man Papa? And if he did, would there ever be some hesitation, a hint of doubt in the back of the boy's mind, something that would ring false in the sound of his voice? The worst possible case of unrequited love, his mother had told him, was feeling rejected by a parent. Was the second worst being rejected by your own child? He knew quite a bit about unrequited love, unreciprocated love. Until he had met his son, he had felt as if every other love were a phantom version, a shadow. People like to say of the sea that la mer pa kembe crasse. The sea does not hide dirt. It does not keep secrets. The sea was both hostile and docile, the ultimate trickster. It was as large as it was small, as long as you could claim a portion of it for yourself. You could scatter both ashes and flowers in it. You could take as much as you wanted from it, but it too could take back. You could make love in it, and you could surrender to it. And oddly enough, surrendering to the sea felt somewhat like surrendering on land, taking a deep breath and simply letting go. You could just as easily lie down in the sea as you might in the woods, and like a very little boy, simply fall asleep. So this second moment is when Claire's parents, well, her father, finds out that she is coming. And Claire's mother works in this funeral home for a man named Monsieur Albert. Monsieur Albert is both the undertaker and the mayor of the town, so that the people of the town joke that there will never be a solution to crime or deaths because the undertaker part of the mayor wants to have customers. So this happens in the funeral home on the day that Claire's dad gets some very big news. Nozias Faustin loved his wife, and one way he liked to show it was by visiting her at the funeral parlor where she worked. One afternoon when he got to the funeral parlor, she was scrubbing the cement table where she washed and dressed the dead. During his visits, he would often find her in the middle of her work, her small frame swimming in her plastic work coat, her fingers wiping beads of water off of a naked corpse. Sometimes it was someone he recognized, and he would wonder how she could touch so intimately in death someone she had spoken to in life. Sometimes, if they had drowned, the bodies would be bloated, unrecognizable. On those occasions, she would hand him a cloth, mouth and nose cover, and would then seem to forget that he was there. She would talk to the dead instead. Moving her face close to their ears, she would recount everything that had happened in town since they had died. Most of the time, she would have other company. Family members would come and help wash and dress the dead. She would watch them for hints of tenderness that she'd then apply to those whose family members preferred not to come. Sometimes she would apply special perfumes, sneak in a pair of socks or stockings of her own choosing, though the dead were never to have shoes. Shoes could only weigh a person down in the afterlife. She would sew some of the clothes for the dead, especially the babies, for whom it was too heartbreaking to buy burial clothes. She often marveled how so many of the photographs brought in for the funeral programs were from decades ago. A 100-year-old funeral program's cover photo was usually a wedding portrait or a special occasion likeness from when the person was barely out of adolescence. Every now and then, she would be asked by the family to extract gold crowns from the dead's mouth, but she would never dare to do that herself. She would ask Monsieur Albert to do it. She was glad, she sometimes told Nozias, that she never had to go into the walk-in freezer to take a corpse off the shelf by herself, not even a baby corpse, which she could have easily lifted and carried. Whenever she had to wash and dress the bodies, she would find them already on the table, waiting. As he walked towards her in the washroom that afternoon, she did not rush to greet Nozias. The plastic coat she was wearing was weighing her down, he thought, or maybe it was something else. Suddenly, she removed her work coat, letting it fall at her feet. Underneath, she was wearing her favorite dress, a bell-shaped parrot green dress that she had sewn herself. Her hair was neatly brushed, the cornrows lined up like roads on a map to some mysterious land. Her hands were folded over her breast, and she closed her eyes, looking as though she was sleeping on her feet. He wondered if this is what she'd been doing before he had come in, listening with her eyes closed to everything around her. Nous pas deux encore, kounya nous trois. We are no longer two. Now we are three, she said. He opened his eyes wide. Her childlike face, her usually serene childlike face, was tied in an inexplicable knot, as though she were fighting back tears. How do you tell someone you're pregnant in a funeral parlor? He asked when she was done speaking. He was too delighted not to laugh. He rushed over and grabbed her, then stepped back for fear of crushing her. She was laughing too when he threw his arms around her. Then he was a bit sad, and his sadness, mingled with intense joy, made him hold her even tighter. How does life itself, as much as you must want it in your body, not feel futile when you have seen so many dead? She had told him about pregnant mothers that she had dressed for their burial with their babies still inside them. How could this not have been on her mind that afternoon? I told Monsieur Albert, she said, that I won't be washing and dressing the dead anymore. He had grown used to the dead being part of her life. Because she had touched so many corpses, some of their friends and neighbors wouldn't even allow her to shake their hands or wouldn't eat the food that she cooked. But he was happy to live with all of that, if it meant living with her. Sometimes he could even smell the dead on her and the embalming fluids and disinfectant. The hands that stroked the faces of the dead stroked his. He ate from those hands. He kissed them. He loved them. He loved their constellations of scars from all the sewing she did without thimbles. He loved how rough her fingertips could feel, how like a tiny grater, even when she was being gentle with him. And he knew that her sympathy for the dead, her compassion for everyone, would make her a good mother, a great mother. That afternoon in the funeral parlor, it was as if life had sprung up to embrace him, even in this place of death. He raised her dress to her waist, bent down and pressed his ear against her still flat stomach, and held his ear there, listening for some faint new sounds. I told the baby not to tell you anything yet, she joked. After she died, he would remember seeing her body laid out on the cot where they had slept together since she had come to live with him. He was shocked to see that in death, the baby was no longer in it. Her stomach was still round. The midwife had put that same parrot green dress on his wife, and it looked small, too tight on her body. Her dead hands were folded over her chest in a way that had reminded him of how she had been standing against the wall in the funeral parlor that afternoon. When he bent over, he pressed, in the funeral parlor that afternoon, when he had bent over and pressed his ear against her belly in the wash and dress room, she had kept muttering, "Ça, c'est pas nous. Ça, c'est pas nous. Ça, c'est pas nous. This is ours. She is ours. Ours, ours, ours." So this final moment is, well, not final moment in the book, but final moment that I will read aloud, is when Madame Gaël decides to take Claire. Madame Gaël has lost her husband. She's lost her daughter. She's a very strong but very wounded woman. So on Claire's 7th birthday, which is the day that the story goes across, she decides that she will take Claire after thinking about it for as long as Claire has been alive. And Claire then decides that she wants no part of it. That's another part of the story. But this section is right before Claire goes off. And Madame Gaëlle is pondering this decision she's about to make about becoming a mother again. But also she's thinking about life, about migration, and the possibility of raising someone else's child. Now there's very important, and this is something we call the warn. It's like a ring around the rosy, which game, which I mimic also a little bit of the structure of the book. So the warn is what actually draws Madame Gaëlle's attention to Claire that night, and some of the other little girls who are playing on the beach, where you still are because you are visiting Villerose. When she finally made it to the beach that night, Madame Gaëlle spotted a group of little girls. They were holding one another's hands and moving clockwise in a circle, a singing circle, a one. Gaëlle was too far away to hear what they were singing, but she could hear their laughter. Each little girl, it seemed, trying to outdo the next. They seemed to be the happiest people in Villerose. 6 little brown and black angels just skipping around, falling sea hearts and sand dollars. Gaëlle moved slowly, not wanting the pleasure of her approach to end. She too had played the one as a child, during recess and at night in her parents' yard with visiting friends. What she remembered most about it, though, was how less lonely she always felt holding someone else's hand. It would have sounded odd if she told someone how much she wanted to take all those little girls home, set them up in the many empty rooms of her large house, and whenever she was sad, asked them to play the one with her. There were many days when she wanted to grab a little girl off the street and just hold her in her arms, just to inhale her smell, the smell that the man she slept with lacked. These men's smells were musty. They smelled of roads and dust. They smelled of work, of sweat, and of other women. But little girls smelled of roses and wet leaves, of talcum powder and the dew. In spite of what everyone had told her after her daughter died, longings like this had never subsided, and her losses had not made her stronger. They had made her weak. They had given others control and power over her. She did not want to continue being weak, but she did not want to die either. She was too eager to see what would come next, what her husband and daughter had missed. She was both hungry for life and terrified of it. Her evenings with the men she slept with let the rage and confusion disappear for a while and allowed her to make it through her days. There were times, though, that she just wanted to take off, leave Villerose, leave the country, and never come back. But she had heard too much about the difficulties of starting a new life in another land to want to try. She had heard about people who had been infantilized while learning a new language, people who ended up cleaning houses or wiping the asses of other people's children. She saw these people return to Villerose at Christmas or in the summertime with extravagant hairstyles and expensive-looking clothes, but their eyes always betrayed them to her. All the humiliation they had endured could be detected there, she thought. Their skins betrayed them too, the burns from the dry cleaner's steamer or the car wash or the restaurant kitchens, as visible as brands on animals. No, none of that was for her. Her ancestors on both sides were buried at the town cemetery among the town's oldest families. She could not be diaspora. she liked her ghost nearby. She could never live in a foreign land, then return only a few times a year. She could not ever risk dying and being buried in a cold place. She would always be here, she thought, like the boulder that stopped her feet when at last she reached those little girls. Claire realized that she was being watched and occasionally glanced her way. Like her mother, Claire was beautiful. She moved more gracefully, more purposefully than the rest of the girls, even the ones who were older. Gaëlle walked over to the girls, and immediately her presence stopped the one. "Is your papa here?" Gaëlle asked Claire. The girl nodded. She was looking down at her hands, then at her sand-coated feet, and patient, the other girls lost interest and drifted away. Gaëlle motioned for the girl to follow her. Claire sat down next to her, and from behind one of the boulders pulled out a pair of rubber sandals. Gaëlle waited for her to finish placing the sandals on her feet. Then she said, "I knew your mother." Claire's eyes seemed to light up the way children's eyes do when they're hungry for stories. "I knew your mother longer than you've been alive," Gaëlle told her. "Your mother was my friend." It was not altogether a lie. The girl's head was arched towards her, her mouth wide open, as though to inhale Gaëlle's words, which came out so fast that Gaëlle could barely stop. Gaëlle was not sure anymore what she was thinking or what she was actually saying out loud. "When your mother was pregnant with you, she waited so long, your mother, she waited so long to have you. I wouldn't even say wait. She tried to pull you out of the sky, pry you out of God's hands. Yes, God's hands. I say, I don't go to church every Sunday. I don't go to church at all. But I know she wanted you so bad. I know she pulled you out of God's hands. That's the only way I can put it. She was well the whole time you were inside of her, never seemed tired when she came to the shop, except that last week when she didn't come. Then the midwife was sent for. No one knows what happened while you were being born. I hear the midwife thought, all was going well. You shouldn't blame yourself. She's gone, back in God's hands, and no one can pull her back. Not you, not me, not your father. No one can pull her back. She's back in God's hands, like my husband, like my Rosie, back in God's hands. They're all back in God's hands, them and everyone else who has died, who didn't deserve to die. Though who deserves to die? Too many people die here. And why do the rest of us get to live? Thank you.
So we'll now have about 15 minutes of Q&A. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Anna will come over with the microphone so everyone can hear what you want to ask Edwidge, and open the bidding right now. Anyone have a question? So I guess I will break the ice. So it's a lot of writers and aspiring writers in the audience. Could you give us a little taste of sort of what your writing routine looks like? Do you write every day? How long do you write for every day? That kind of thing.
What does my writing routine look like? Do I write every day? These days my writing routine looks like driving the children to school. But I have small children, so my writing routine is around them. I don't write every day. I write days that I can, but I find that I do a lot of planning and writing in my head while I'm doing other things. So by the time I sit down, I'm thinking before I would sit down, you do all the sort of the requisite internet browsing and everything. But now I sit down sort of with the with a bit of a goal, and I take more notes. But it's just kind of squeezing it whenever I can. But when that question comes up too, I always think to aspire. I always want to add to aspiring writers that, even if I did write every day, that doesn't mean you have to write every day. I think it's different for everybody, and the best advice that anybody can give an aspiring writer about sort of that time is that to just make your writing work around whatever life you have. Don't wait till you're at a cottage on the beach at that, residency, but just try to work your writing around your life, and that way also your life feeds your writing. There's a sort of, and it becomes integral, so it's not something that you're saving for later, for when you retire. It just becomes part of your life.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. What a gift.
Thank you. Thank you
I
for
just wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience with your character development. Do you have a set plan in your head when you set out to write a story about who your characters are and the direction that they're going to go in, or do you find that you may have that a little bit going on and then they begin to kind of let you know where they're going, or what is your process with that?
Well, the character development in terms of how the characters come, it depends on, it all depends on the story. It changes with each story. For example, with Claire, I remember the day she came, if you will, and she came kind of the way her mother. There's a scene in the book where her parents are out at sea, and then the mother goes in the water, and sort of like she's luminescent, and then she decides to name her that. And I had that. That's all I had. I had that scene of sort of a little girl who has these parents, and then I just decided to follow these characters, and in the writing they reveal themselves to me, sort of, as I followed them to the story. I love it. I love when characters surprise me. And I was talking a little bit earlier about this, the character who's a radio journalist in the book, Louise George, and I wrote pretty much her based on some radio journalist I knew, until then I found out this other medical issue that she has, and then when those came together, it was like, wow. And then there's that moment have been writing a character for a long time, and you just know that moment when it's full. It's like, oh, okay, she's fully human, and she's like, I know her, even though you don't know everything about them. But it depends. Some characters come fully formed, with all their, everything. And then others, you kind of have to pursue them, and it's like, show yourself to me, surprise me, or leave me alone. Some of them won't leave you alone. And those are the best ones. I think the ones that kind of haunt you, that feel as real to you as people For example, Claire, I know until the very end of the process, my editor was like, well, what happens to her? Where does she go? She became like such a real child to me that I felt like it was very hard to actually decide where she would end up.
Hi, good evening. Thanks
Good
for
evening.
sharing with us. I am Caribbean also. I'm from St. Kitts. My son-in-law is first-generation Haitian, and my grandchildren are proud Creole speakers. I also like to think that we have a particular affinity because we claim Henri Christophe as being also born in St. Kitts. I have read your books, The Farming of the Bones. I have gotten so much historical depth from you. I like to think that you inform the future for me because of my grandchildren and learning their culture, the Haitian part of their culture, and also the past because it really is African. But Clear by the Sea Light puzzled me as a genre for you because it was so different to the other work that I had read. And I wondered, I understand the collage, I understood, but the end left me baffled. And I wondered why you ended so abruptly. And whatever happened to Claire? Really, I don't want to. I don't want to end. I don't want to end the book for those people who haven't read it.
Okay.
And so don't tell me.
I'll tell
But
you
I
in
only want to
private.
know why. What made you end it as abruptly as you did?
Okay. Well, I think people like me, and by that I mean people who kind of write the stories I do, who come from the places that we come from, people always say, you're writing the same thing, so I'm happy that you said it's very different, because that's what I strive to tell, a range of stories. So, Claire to me was she was her own individual being, but she was very representative of a lot of young children who find themselves in this type of situation, where their fates are uncertain, where where their lives, like how their lives end up, is very uncertain, and her father is trying to he's trying to direct her life in a certain way by putting her into this family, but there's no guarantee that she'll have how it will end up. If she's lucky, it will turn out well. But so I really wanted it would have been, I just felt like for me it would have been untrue to sort of write a very fairy tale ending for that particular story, for that so I can, I'm going to think of an ending between now and when we see each other here, and I'll tell you in your ear, but that was also one of the things that sort of troubled me about that entire situation, that led me to write the book, that often the fate of children like that remain uncertain, remain ambiguous. Thank you. I think I'm going to keep it for when other people ask the same, because others have.
I'm really excited that I got to come to your reading. And
Thank you.
initially you invited political questions, and I wondered, in your mind, what is the role of the author to speak publicly on issues of the day, and is that role different for diasporic authors or authors of post-colonial fiction?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the author's choice. I mean, I said it because there was always at least one, one question on one political question. So, but I think it's the choice of the author, and how much they feel they know, how much they want to to partake, to participate. I mean, it could be, there's a whole range of attitudes from the writing itself being a political act, to people who are marching on the streets. I mean, I think it's the choice of the author. I think the role, art is one of those few places where people are truly free, and I think it's natural for some people, for us to want people to have that freedom in the way they live, in the way they sort of to have a freedom that mirrors that, which is what probably leads to the activism of many authors. The writers I knew about growing up were all engaged in some ways in fighting a dictatorship. And in fighting that dictatorship, just fighting for their own survival. Some of them were exiled some of them were killed. So of course, that's the model that's always in front of me. It's not one that I follow as faithfully as they did, because they were, their lives was a struggle. Being able to write was like taking your life into your own hands. So that's my bar, So I'm always trying to at least, get even a little bit, near there. Not close, but that's my inspiration.
Hi, thank you for reading, and of course I'm Haitian, so I'm always happy to see you.
Sak pase.
My question is, who are the authors that influenced you the most as a writer and as a person, if that's two different things?
Thank you. Well, those two questions follow in a way. You know, when I just, I feel like when I was in Haiti, when I was in school, it wasn't true for everybody, but I was taught to read, I read, they taught us mostly French writers, so you read Voltaire, and of all of them, I liked Zola the best because I felt like there was a lot of what was happening in those books that was very similar to what was around me, especially like the neighborhoods of the busyness and the struggle and some of the, the poverty that people were struggling with in those books. So then when I got here, I couldn't read in English initially, and I went to the Brooklyn Public Library, and thankfully they had a shelf that says Livres Haïtiens. So they had sort of a small canon of Haitian literature. They had Jacques Romain, Jacques-Stéphane Alexis, Marie Chauvet, and I just, Gigi Dominique, and I just gobbled those up. And Jacques-Stéphane Alexis is a really, he's like for Farming of Bones, is sort of like that, the Génial Compère Soleil, sort of the godfather of that book, and I worked on a translation of one of his books in the Flicker of an Eyelid, Marie Chauvet and those writers. The very first book I read in English was Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And that's like I couldn't have written Breath Eyes Memory if I had not read that book. I felt like that book gave me permission because it was so bold, and the fact that it was autobiography was even more powerful, because I thought, wow, she wrote that book and she's walking around, she's happy, and it also gave you it just gives you this possibility that's also this afterlife to a book, because when you're a young author, you're thinking of writing the one book, you feel like you're always going to live in that one book, and you're never going to leave it behind, and so I after reading that book, I felt like I could write anything, and I could, and that there was even, I remember feeling, I couldn't define it then, but feeling kind of like, there's safety and almost, and this self-revelation, that there's like sanity in it, and that because you've put this thing down, and then you can move along.
Well, my question is actually related, I think, to the answer that you just gave. I read The Farming of Bones at an undergrad class here at Hunter called Black Women Writers, where we read your book alongside also African writers, other Caribbean writers, African American writers. And I'm wondering if you feel like you belong to that, like some kind of global Black women tradition or community.
Absolutely, yeah. And first of all, I'm like the opposite of the Woody Allen thing. I want to belong to anything that would have me. but this is an especially exquisite club, and I feel doubly privileged that I've gotten to know some of these wonderful women, and as a reader, it's sort of the most exquisite thing that I've been in the presence of some of these women that I'm taught along with, and some of them are actually nice to me, and it's what I was longing for when I was a girl reading, and I sought their company in the books. So it's beyond an honor to be in that company. That's it. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. As I promised you, darkness. Thank you.